Thank you everyone for coming back to our event today. And we are very, very excited to have author Kent Heckenlively with us today to talk about big tech censorship. He's not writing just one book on big tech censorship. It's two books. We're talking about Google and Facebook. The Google book is called Google Leaks, a whistleblower's expose of big tech censorship, which is a story of Zach Voorhees, who was a senior engineer at Google for many years. And then the other book is Behind the Mask of Facebook, and that is with Ryan Hartwig. So Ken is going to tell us what's behind both of these books and talk about this issue of big tech censorship. So we're very, very excited to have Kent today with us. And thank you for coming back to our event. You're going to be glad you did and that you heard this interview. So Kent, thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. So where do you want to start on this? I mean, people, if people don't know, you've also got the Plague of Corruption series, which has been a best-selling book and a series of books, right? With Judy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my friends say I'm becoming the Danielle Steele of corruption. Okay. so kind of let's talk about how that happened. So when Plague of Corruption, my second Plague book with Judy Mikovits, became such a runaway bestseller, it went to #1 on Amazon for all books for a week, beating out not only Michelle Obama's Becoming, but it also beat out those wimpy teen vampires in the new installment of the Twilight Saga. This time, not from Bella's view, but it's from Edward's side of the story. So you know how exciting that will be. So, but you know, one of the things that happens when you start getting some notoriety is you start meeting people who you never imagined you would actually meet. So I had this sort of interesting thing happen, which was when Judy's started getting really popular, she needed to create a social media presence. Okay. So we got a social media guy, and you know, he got her on Twitter, and very quickly she got up to like 175,000 Twitter followers. And I was thinking, oh, great. And I heard about this, social media guy, Zach. And I'm like, oh, that's great. That's great. And then, a situation came up that I kind of had to help out a little bit. And then I learned his last name as being Zach Voorhees. I'm like, Zach Voorhees, I think I've heard that name. And they said, oh, yeah, he's the one who blew the whistle on Google. And I'm like, the Zach Voorhees that was on Project Veritas? And they're like, oh, yeah. And so I'm like talking to him. I'm like, okay, what the hell am I doing talking to this guy? You know, he's so high up there. And so, I solved the problem that was going on. And then Zach called me up to say, how appreciative he was, because I seem to be the rational one,
right,
in a lot of situations in my life. And so he said, so Ken, you're the one who's really the writer behind all of these books with Judy, right? And I said, yeah, that's me. He goes, would you help me write my book? And I'm like, Zach, you can't see me, but I am down on my knees in my kitchen begging you to let me write your story. And so we started working on that. And so then I started learning all about, he was a senior engineer at Google for 8.5 years. And really after Trump got elected in 2016, Google turned towards the dark side. And Zach eventually became so disturbed by what he was seeing that he started doing a search inside of Google for fake news and how they were trying to create a single point of truth across all platforms, which is about the most terrifying thing I think I've ever heard in my entire life. And at the time that he did this search, he was legally allowed to do that because Google had a completely open system, and they
Right.
encouraged people to look at any document that anybody else was working on. So he eventually took 952 pages of documents about how Google was essentially trying to program people, because Google started out as saying their mission statement was to organize the world's information and make it accessible to everybody. Okay. But then it changed to, well, we're going to organize the world's information, we're going to classify it, and then we're going to feed you the approved version. And they created this thing called the single point of truth. And so, that was really disturbing. What was also really disturbing is they had a system called Purple Rain. Okay. And, I don't know if it's from the Prince song or not, but the idea was that within 5 minutes of a news event hitting the internet, Google can start crafting the narrative. And so, just terrible, terrible things. And what was kind of interesting is the first real big test of this system of narrative control was with the Las Vegas shooting. And so very quickly they started clamping down on alternative explanations for what had happened. And eventually Zach left Google in 2019. He provided all these documents to Project Veritas. What was really kind of humorous was he'd actually tried to provide these documents to Project Veritas in 2018. But what he provided to them was so overwhelming and kind of unbelievable that Project Veritas almost thought like it was an intelligence sting operation. Like, this stuff is so amazing, it can't be true, that we're being set up here. And it was only when Project Veritas, in its further investigation of Google, came across another source who was talking about the same programs being used, that they said, oh, we got to call that guy back. We got to get this guy on camera. So that started the Google book. And, as I'm into that, and, my agent is so happy about that. And she said, and she kind of does a lot of stuff with big tech. And so, I'm kind of finishing that up, and she goes, I've got somebody who was a whistleblower from Facebook who worked for their Facebook contracted content moderating to a company called Cognizant. And so this guy recorded a whole bunch of undercover video for Project Veritas, over 200 hours of the content moderation decisions that were being made at Facebook. And so I was like, oh man, I've gone from being the science and medicine whistleblower to the big tech whistleblower stories.
Wow.
And but what was interesting is, it seems like they're different things, science and big tech, but really it's just a story of people and people making decisions. And, what was really interesting, especially in the Facebook story, was that this guy, Ryan, had been hired. He was really a skilled linguist, and his Spanish, both conversational and academic Spanish, was really high. So he was hired for the Latin American market. And so a lot of their problems that they were having was that the cartels were using Facebook to, put videos on of them executing people and terrorizing towns. So you start to think like, okay, well, I understand there's a problem, and you start going after that problem, but then you see something else sort of sneaking into the narrative. And it seemed like Facebook went from looking at the cartels as a big problem to looking at half of the American voting public as a big problem.
Yeah. So that they transitioned from censorship of something that probably needed to be censored at least to some degree, to a political censorship. And
Yeah.
it's interesting because it's like corruption, you know, the old saying that corruption, you know, what is it? Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. You know,
Yeah.
and it's almost like power, that power to do things does have, it's almost like a drug. When you have too much power, it just goes to your head and you can't stop it. It's almost like it's addictive. And I think that's what happens in these cases with these companies. They realize that they have the power to control what people think, because they can control what they're seeing on their, you know, on Facebook and Google. They control virtually everything people can see. You know, so it's really scary, isn't it?
Yeah, and you know, I kind of come from more of a conservative background, but I think it's also it's a principled, fundamental background in terms of looking at human nature. And you say human nature, if you're a conservative, you say human nature is flawed. I am a flawed human being. So therefore, please don't give me complete control. You know, I want to have my rights, but I don't want to step on anybody else's rights. I want to, you know, I want to exist in a community of people who are free to speak their mind. Right. And all of us having the ability to speak our minds, we're going to come up with better decisions than if one person was only in charge. And, you know, to me, when Zach had this document, which is, we highlight prominently in the book, where Google says their intent is to determine a single point of truth. I thought, I don't think in any, you know, science fiction dystopian world I've ever come across something so terrifying. Because, you know, with my book, Plague of Corruption, yes, I really like this book. I don't want this to be the only book that exists in the world. Okay? I want people who completely disagree with everything that I say. I am committed to living in the system where my critics have just as many rights as I do. But what seems to be happening in the big tech companies is that they have decided who's good, who's bad, who gets a voice, and who doesn't. And if the history of the world is any guide, that only leads one place, and it's not a good place.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right, and it's got to be stopped. And I don't know how to stop it. Have you thought about that? What's the solution to this? I guess what you're doing is part of the solution, is exposing it.
Well, you know, I'm a big fan of Malcolm Gladwell and his work.
Yes.
And he's got a really interesting book called David and Goliath. And I love it because what he does is he takes the David and Goliath story and he puts a different perspective on it. The David and Goliath story, as most people think about it, is that it's a 1 in 1,000 shot that this little guy beats the big guy, right?
Right.
So, but Malcolm Gladwell goes back to the Bible and he says, we're misunderstanding the story. Because first of all, there's Goliath. Why is Goliath a giant? Well, there is a condition in which you become a giant. And one of the problems with that is you're often legally blind or functionally blind, okay? And in the Bible story itself, when they do their match, each warrior is supposed to walk unassisted onto the field of battle, right? But Goliath is led onto the field of battle by another soldier. And so it's like, wait a minute, is Goliath big, armored, and blind? And one of the things that he says to David when he comes with his sling is, "Are you a dog coming at me with sticks?" And it's like, how can you mistake a sling for a stick?
Mhm.
Okay. So the giant is blind. Okay. So that's one part of the equation. The other part of the equation is, how devastating of a weapon is a sling by somebody who knows how to use it? Well, Gladwell looks at the research and he finds out that somebody who knows how to use a sling is like accurate at 100 yards within, a relatively short, small area. It can really be highly effective. The rock, the speed at which it comes and its mass is equivalent to a pistol bullet. Okay. So now you take the story again. You've got a blind giant and basically a teenager with a pistol, and he's a marksman.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
How does that story end? It ends with the giant dead 999 times out of 1,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Google and Facebook are Goliaths. Okay. So how do we be David? Google and Facebook exist because we allowed them to exist. Okay. So what happens if, in the wake of these books and other people saying things, they lose 10, 20, 30% of their market share? What if people start abandoning them? They can't sustain those kinds of losses. So the way I look at it is, yes, they're giants. Giants have weaknesses. We have to know what those weaknesses are, and then we have to attack based on the weaknesses. So I'm not going to be, attacking Goliath with a sword. I'm going to be attacking Goliath with a sling.
Right. In a very intelligent, carefully thought out manner. But also that you're right. One of the things we have an advantage of is the amount of us that are there that don't like what's going on, and our ability to stop using them and stop using the services and have them fail economically. And what is happening right now to create alternatives so people can get the same services somewhere else with a company, right?
And what I would say, if I had the executives of Google and Facebook listening to this broadcast, what I would tell them is, I am here to warn you. You have built remarkable platforms. So many people have worked so hard to put it together. You are not using your platforms well. You are in danger. You need to change course. If you do not change course, you are likely to have significant trouble or the collapse of your companies. It can happen. It has happened to other giants in history. It has happened to other empires. You can choose to see me as an enemy, or you can choose to see me as a critic who's probably going to save your company if the grown-ups in your company listen. Okay? We are Americans. We have a certain set of values. We can disagree with each other and not seek to destroy each other. What Facebook and Google are essentially trying to do is to change our system to a dictatorial one. And I am here to tell you that the verdict of history is that people reject dictatorships, even if they have all the bells and whistles. Because you know what? Yes, you can build these platforms. other people can build them as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So Google and Facebook, you got the advantage. But if you're going to lose the trust of the people, you can't get that back. And
Right.
so they're in extreme danger. Personally, I love Google and Facebook. They're wonderful. But they're not doing the right thing.
Yeah.
They need to change course or else they will fail.
Yeah. 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 And the people that are left there will just be living in a bubble where they're talking to each other in a big echo chamber. And the people that disagree at all with them are going to be somewhere else. Like with I believe Mike Lindell has just come out with an alternative. I know there's what is it? Gab is an alternative, I believe.
Yeah.
Book.
Yeah.
And there are other ones that are coming out that can do what Google can do. They're just opening the door for competitors to come after them.
Yeah, and it's so sad because Facebook and Google, technically, fantastic, amazing, remarkable. It's the soul of these people which is flawed. It's their actions which are flawed. It's not the technology. Technology is our friend. It's how they're choosing to use it. And so, I look at these two books as, warnings to these companies that I genuinely believe that if they don't change within 6 months, probably 6 months, 6 months from now, we're going to be talking about, gee, why did Facebook lose 25% of its value? Why did Google lose 25% of its value? I mean, these organizations, they're behemoths, but because they're behemoths, they also need a ton of money. Okay. And so these companies are very vulnerable to disruptions, and by acting in ways that loses the trust of people, they're putting themselves in great danger. Now, the other platforms, there's going to be a period of evolution where they're going to make lots of mistakes and everything. I know it. These new platforms, probably for the first 6 months that they're really in existence, they're going to have a lot of bugs. They're going to make a lot of mistakes, but they're going to get better. And if the people trust you, they will put up with mistakes and setbacks.
Absolutely.
But if people don't trust you, which is what's happening to so many people in our country with Facebook, Google, Twitter, others, it's like a marriage.
Yeah.
If there's not trust, you don't have a relationship. We have relationships with these companies, and we're not satisfied with them right now. And I think that the important thing about these two books is a lot of people have suspicions about what's going on, but to actually read the documents, to go through it, to hear the stories of people who are on the inside and what they're seeing, that's hard to come back from. And so I think the time is short for Google and Facebook and Twitter to change their ways.
No, very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. I think you're absolutely right. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like for Zach to do what he did?
It was really, I think it was.
It must have been tough, right? I mean, it must have been really hard for him.
It was terrifying because he had worked for them for basically 5-6 years. He left for a period of time in order to try and make it as an entrepreneur. He's such a wonderful character. I mean, he was actually on the TV show America's Favorite Makers, and he was trying to use technology to create, LED jewelry and, stuff to make motorcycle riding safer, gloves with turn signals and everything. I mean, such an amazing character, and didn't work out. So he goes back to Google. Google rehires him, and he starts working there shortly before the November 2016 election, and he's kind of politically indifferent at this time. I mean, he about the election. He had actually been somebody who had marched in Occupy Wall Street protests against the big banks and everything. And so, he's really kind of on the liberal side. And, he was completely uninterested in the 2016 election. He thought Hillary Clinton was going to win. But when Trump won, then he's present at the big meeting that Google has after it, where they basically say things like, the executives are going, I was personally offended by the election of Donald.
I saw that video.
Yeah.
There were people in tears and everything.
And the first chapter is really that meeting. And then I delve back into a bit of his own personal life. But it's terrifying to see these people who, in some ways, I mean, it's, how can I say it? Do we really fear the nerds? I guess is the best way to say it, because we haven't thought of nerds as people to fear. I mean, in the midst of that meeting about, oh, Trump won, the executives are going, I want you all to express your inner googliness and be good to each other. And I'm just going like, oh, this is terrible. This is like the nerd Nazis, and they're feeling also sorry for themselves. And how can we make sure this never happens again? And they got, they're wearing their hats with the little propellers. They've got the googly eyes. And I'm going like, I don't know whether to laugh or be terrified by these people. And so, for Zach, it was difficult because he would like have conversations with people, and he started doing things because one of the things he ran into trouble with was there was they had all these internal social links where people could share things, and so there was one social link about socialism go sort of thing, and he puts up a socialism no link, and so listing kind of like how communism has killed millions of people in the 20th century, and that sort of thing. And it's kind of funny. It's like you can say good things about socialism, but you can't say bad things about socialism because that will make people mad. And so that started gets his brain going. And one of the things that I think is unappreciated by the big tech giants is, yes, Silicon Valley is very liberal. 100% agree. I live not far from Silicon Valley.
Right.
But you also have engineers, okay? Engineers don't like to be told what to do. And I don't think Google and Facebook and Twitter understand that their engineers are very independently minded. So there's a danger of like 20 to 30% of the engineers who are in these companies saying to themselves, what the hell is going on? I can be liberal, but I got conservative friends and everything, and they're just fine too. Mm-hmm. Why am I getting rid of these, half of the country? And so I think what's going to happen, and that's why I like stories of insiders, is because Zach loves innovation. He loves the technology of it. He's also somebody who grew up reading lots of dystopian, authoritarian science fiction novels like 1984, Brave New World. Mm-hmm. And he was just like, oh my God, I started working for the company that said, don't be evil. Yeah. And now I'm working for the company that says we are here to establish a single point of truth, and any story that appears in the world, we will put the narrative together in 5 minutes.
Right.
And you know what he said was that his soul was being crushed by that. And when he finally did what he did, and first when he did his first appearance on Project Veritas, he was in darkness, his voice was altered, and then a month later he comes out, his face and everything, because people are going like, oh, who is this anonymous whistleblower? And he says, it was terrifying to do that, but it was as if a weight was lifted from his soul.
Right.
And and I think that there are lots of people who won't let their souls be crushed by that, who are aware enough of what's going on that they look at Zach's story and they're saying to themselves, okay, when is my moment going to come for me to take my stand?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I don't think the executives at Google or Facebook know what to do about it, because they're smart people. They must understand this is really dangerous.
Well, I think people like Zach and Edward Snowden and Julian Assange are true heroes. I mean, look what they've done to expose truth, expose what's going on to the world and what's happened to them. I hope that doesn't go as bad for Zach as it has for Snowden and Assange. But
well, I got to tell you a story, because it almost went that bad for Zach. Let me tell you, and to his credit, Zach made all the right choices. So basically, Zach resigns from Google, let's say June of 2019, and he's given all this stuff to Project Veritas. Project Veritas is publishing this stuff, and Google is going crazy with like, who is this? Who is this that's leaking this? And they start to suspect Zach. Okay. And he's got a Twitter account, and he actually gets, I think they call it spear phishing, which is somebody who starts claiming that he is is the anonymous whistleblower. And Zach, because he knows technology and everything, gets one of his buddies to engage this troll and tells this troll like, oh, you're really wrong about that. You should check this website out. It'll show you that you're wrong. Well, you spearfish somebody back.
Right.
So they get all of his information. Turns out this guy who's a troll just happens to work at Google in their Michigan office. Oh, are you telling me that's not being set up by Google?
Yeah.
And then, so 2 months. So when it becomes really contentious, he starts getting letters from Google's attorneys, okay? And he sends them back. He puts out a tweet with a picture of a knight with his sword at a dragon's neck, okay? And he says, look, if you come after me, I got a dead man switch. Anything happens to me, it's all going out. So back off. And what does Google do in response? They send a police detachment to his apartment for a wellness check.
Well,
because they're concerned. Who says big tech doesn't have a big heart?
Right,
2 months after he's quit, they just want to check on him to see that he's okay. and so he's like, I'm not going down there.
Yeah.
And his apartment has a long stairway up because it's in San Francisco. And so apparently the cops come in, they look up this long stairway, and they're like, this looks like a kill zone for us. And so they retreat, and, so they're like, Zach, you need to come down, talk to us. I haven't done anything. No, you need to come down and talk to us. And then it turns out that one of the people in the apartment building is a fire artist, fire dancer, or something like that. And so she's got like a can of denatured alcohol at the front entrance. And so the police say that might be a bomb. So they call in the bomb squad.
Oh my God.
With the bomb robot. They've got helicopters circling the place. And so finally Zach says, okay, I'll come down. This is a bit too much. He's recording with his phone as he's like, I'm coming down. And, first of all, the bomb robot is blocking the door, so he can't come out, for like 10 minutes. He finally comes out, he's walking towards them. They're like, turn around, so he's got to turn around, walk backwards to them. And, then they take him, they don't cuff him, but then they ask the wellness questions. And to me, it's one of the most humorous parts of the book.
Oh,
because I mean, these are just regular cops, right?
Right.
They've been sent on a wellness check. And so, they go through the wellness questions like, have you thought about harming yourself or others? Have you gone off any medications? Blah, blah, blah. And he's like, no. And the cop says to him, well, I'm a little confused then. Why is it that Google sent us out here on a wellness check? And he goes, well, the only thing I can think is that I'm a Google whistleblower, and let me show you on my phone the letter that I just recently sent to the US Department of Justice, turning these documents over to them as well as to Project Veritas. And the cops are like, well, that would explain it. And, the poor cops, right?
Yeah.
And then they start getting into, sort of like a friendly banter because Zach starts, chatting it up with the cops, and he says, hey, I love cop shows. Which do you think is the most realistic? Law and Order, CSI, and the cops all immediately say Reno 911. Reno 911 is the most accurate cop show around. And so, you find yourself saying like, okay, we're not enemies with the people. We're not enemies with the cops. We're not enemy with the blue collar regular guys. We're enemies of these billionaires who think that they know better.
Yeah. What everyone should think, whether you're a cop or a conservative or Democrat or whatever, they want everybody to have that one single point of truth. What they determine is the truth. It's really unbelievable. But
Clyde, if I said to my wife, we've been married 25 years, I am the single point of truth in this house, I couldn't sell that.
Yeah, no.
Even though she shares my bed every night, I can't sell that argument.
No, you never will. I've been in June, so like 2 months from now, it'll be 51 years for us.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I was 20 when we got married. So
wow.
Yeah, no, there's no single point of truth from my side, that's for sure.
Yeah. So I find myself of like, I'm sorry, if two people can't agree on a single point of truth,
right?
Why are we going to say 7 billion people have to agree on a single point of truth?
Yeah, it's really something. And it doesn't seem to be just Google and Facebook. It seems to be all these big tech companies seem to be in the same vein, Amazon as well. And so it is very, very scary because these companies are so powerful. But I think you're right. I love your David and Goliath story. I think it's a great analogy. And, right now it may seem that these big tech companies are unbeatable. but it's going to be very soon, especially when your books come out. They're coming out soon. Both books are
Yeah.
yeah.
So they should be coming out. I think both of my big tech books are coming out. I think it's June 22nd.
Yeah, and you can go, I'm right now on, if you go to Amazon right now, you can see Google Leaks, a Whistleblower's Exposé, Big Tech Censorship, and see that. And you can actually order it right now, I guess. I'm going to order.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
And see, here's what I'm hoping, Clyde. So
Yeah.
I got my two big tech books coming out. I've got the third plague book coming out. I want to win the Triple Crown this summer. You know, I want 3 New York Times bestsellers. Okay.
Wow.
Plague of Corruption became a New York Times bestseller. 3 New York Times bestsellers this summer. That's what I'm shooting for.
Yeah. Well, I would, you know, I don't know whether I'm a believer in astrology or not, but, you know, I know a lot of people that are into that. I would love to see your chart because it must have some really serious alignments in there that with your timing on these books, Plague of Corruption coming out literally the same month that the pandemic hits, and Fauci becoming a central character. You know, it's like a casting of a movie, the whole thing with your book and the pandemic. So,
but I even with all that success, I still can't get my wife to agree that I am the single point of truth.
It's not going to happen, Ken. I can tell you, it's never going to happen. By the way,
what's the value of all of this success if I can't get my wife to agree that I am the single point of truth?
Yes, yes. So again, thank you very much for coming today, folks, and thank you, Kent, for explaining that amazing information for all of us to hear and share with our friends. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Clyde.
All right, you take care now. Thanks for coming, everybody.